Okay, good early eve. Let's jump into YBIT for the second day. I decided to do this one by itself. I will merge the three together, YBIT, Coney, and Misty. But I wanted to go into a little depth for those of you so that we understand this is a unique Yieldmax fund. It operates exactly the same way as the other single stock funds. For those of you that are familiar with YMAX, remember some people are just coming in and buying this fund and maybe didn't own any Yieldmax. So Yieldmax uses an option strategy, and their option strategy is to sell synthetics which mimic the underlying performance of the security. Well, in this case, the underlying security is BITO, and BITO itself utilizes directly futures, Bitcoin futures in the CME Futures market. Okay, so if anyone's never done futures, they're different. And in futures, not only do you have future contract months, and you always have to settle or roll out of a month into the next month, right? So futures, depending on the asset, whether it's gold, silver, copper, lumber, orange juice, cattle, coffee, they all have different months. And so the Bitcoin one has 6 consecutive months, and then they have some quarterly months as well. So anyway, I just wanted to distinguish that because I can show you the BITO calls, both synthetic and what we refer to as naked calls, where they sell the call without ever owning BITO or BTC. And so BITO itself pays a dividend, but again, for those folks in YBIT, you're going to get your dividend through the synthetic calls and puts and the weekly naked calls. You never own BITO and you never own Bitcoin, but both of these funds, BITO being a proshares fund and YBIT being a Yieldmax fund, generate a dividend. Now, I fully expect YBIT to produce a higher cash flow than BITO. Not a lot, because BITO paid, I think, $1 something on a $27, $28 price. BITO's roughly been between $27 and $33 for the last month plus. And I added a few details so you guys can see a lot more into here. But I wanted to cover that to start with, and then I'll show you some graphics about BITO itself, and then what does BITO own underneath, just because it's unique, right? Okay, so let's jump in here. No trades today, right? So on 4/24, we closed down in BITO 4%, right? So it went from 29.01 to 27.85. So we dropped 4%, and Bitcoin dropped as well, the underlying, and so YBIT dropped as well, but we dropped less, right? Just like we dropped less, we went up yesterday 2.25, and basically BITO was flat, although it did go down from 29.03 to 29.01. I didn't bother to make it a minuscule change, but here this reflects accurately what it did. Okay, so let's jump in to the weekly. No change there, but I did update the chart, and I put in some other things that I think are useful here. So for those of you that didn't see yesterday or learning this, we call this active contracts, right? And we distinguish current or active contracts differently than we do synthetics, okay? Because a synthetic involves a pair. And let's jump over to that synthetic, and we label those by the strike price that the synthetic worked at. Okay, so we didn't have any new positions today, but just to catch you up to speed, this is what we did on 423, right? We always buy calls, we're betting a bullish, and we sell puts, which is also a bullish bet. So if you're not bullish on BITO or bullish on Bitcoin, you're really owning the wrong fund here within Yieldmax. So when we buy and these are done at a strike price of $29, right? So we're trading underneath that strike. Now we're more significantly underneath. Yesterday we were right at that strike. So when we sold our call and or bought our call and sold our put, we put some cash in our pocket. So all we have to do is close above this, right? And this runs all the way till May 17th. So no problems with being slightly behind that scenario. But if we had to close out that position, right, and we picked up the 116, but if we had to close out this synthetic right now, we'd be in the hole 166,000. Okay. You guys will learn slowly what all that really means as I go into more detail. And for those of you that already know how Yieldmax work and seen me present are starting to understand it at a greater level. Okay, so let's go over and see. Not much happened in the cash position as you'd expect, right? Although there was one thing, 742,000, but look what they really did. They moved cash around, right? So they put some cash in another one of it. And for those of you that are new, what these funds do at Yieldmax, let's go over to holdings and I can explain it better, is we take a bunch of methods of cash, right? Different treasury expiration dates. These are all in the 5% range, 5.25, 5.5, 5. And this First American Government is another like money market fund. And then we have just cash that hasn't yet moved into one of those buckets that maybe we sold something and it's in transition, okay? So this is all of our cash holdings. And then we put on synthetics and we sell weekly calls. These synthetics are typically in these high IV funds. You know, they intend to pay out big in their high volatility on the underlying security like a BITO. Then they only go out a month. Some of the low IV funds like a JPM Bank, where they have a tracking fund where they're doing synthetics and what they call a covered call strategy, then those are lower IVs and they may go out a couple of months. Okay. So we're in a situation where what changed? Okay. Nothing really changed because they didn't add any share counts. Typically, if you see shares, people buying into the fund, and remember, somebody can say, well, I bought 2,000 yesterday and it didn't change, or I bought it. They do it in blocks of 25,000. They call them creation units. So until they've done 25,000 or more, which in this case, that would be 1/5, right? So that would be 20% of the fund. So you won't see movement for a little bit of time. But in the bigger funds, like when I do Misty and I do Coney, they've got 16,900,000 and then 3 million. So for them to add 200,000 shares in a day is no big deal, especially for Coney. And then that draws in cash and they put in additional positions, okay? So I wouldn't expect to see additional positions here until more people buy into this fund and we reach the 25,000 threshold to add another share. Okay, so now I can go back here and there's nothing really, just moved around some cash. The only reason I even track this is to see if cash moves somewhere or what they did with the cash that people bought in. Now, conversely, if people sell out of a fund, a Yieldmax fund, sometimes they're forced to go out and liquidate shares in the synthetic. We can see a minus, right? These right now are 860. Let's say they needed to go sell 50 of them. Then you would see a sell on the call where they bought it, and you would see a buyback to take the profit on the put, right? So this was a sell and this was a buy and this was a sell. So what they sell yielded more money. We call it a negative here, but technically it's cash. It's just the way accounting works with its debits and credits, and how we really track it. So here is the weekly. I showed you this. So sorry, this weekly is at a 30, right? Our synthetic is 29. So we went out and wrote. Now, when it was 29, we were getting closer to being in the money. So what you always want on these weeklies, for you new guys and girls, we want to basically write that call. Write means sell a call. We don't even own any underlying BITO, so it's a cash settlement on 426, right? We either have to buy it back at the end of the day or earlier in the day on 420. You can buy it back any day, and I'll show you what the price is, right? So we've collected about 95% of the premium on this guy, right? And I'll show you what we sold it for. So that's how they're able to, in the Yieldmax funds, gain income. Now, I know from some of you guys that own BITO, you love it, you love the dividend yield, you love having the exposure to being long, but you don't really understand how it makes money. All right, let me show you the chart, and then I'm going to go in and teach you guys what happens in BITO and how do you know if you're making money in BITO itself instead of just waiting for the payday, which is coming up pretty soon. I think ex-dividend is typically the last day of the month or the first day of the next month. So it's a few days earlier than the Yieldmax and I own some BITO, right? So I'm fairly familiar with it, and I'm a long-term futures guy, gold, silver. Haven't done any Bitcoin futures on the CME, but I can intelligently tell you how they work. All right, so one other thing I added here. 52-week low and high, right? So that gives you some kind of range, right? All of you probably that follow BITO and follow Bitcoin, you know we ran to about 74,000 in BTC, and that was about 33.79 in BITO, right? Well, that in the last 52 weeks been at the lowest 27, right? So we're up there, and you can just look at this chart, right? This shows you we were, 17-ish back in November, right? So this is I just use a 6-month chart because honestly, going way back doesn't, I want to zero in to help you understand what may happen from a technical analysis, right? So I drew a chart. I mean, on the chart, I marked it up, right? So we've got 50 million of volume in a day in BITO, not in YBIT, right? Since we track BITO, we want to know how BITO's doing because that's going to increase the value of YBIT, right? So when BITO went down, YBIT went down. We have an implied volatility, again, 66.47. That's calmed down quite a bit. Look at its high. It's been as high as 108.72. So on the two other funds that I track that are Bitcoin oriented, they actually track to MicroStrategy, which is the largest Bitcoin holder in the world, and Coinbase, which is the exchange, right, that people use for all kinds of crypto. But it's the one the government's really kind of regulated to do it. So both of those stocks have an even higher IV than BITO does, right? But you can see the range here from very high to low. I mean, Misty, the other fund I report on, it has a 122, 124. I've seen it 165, right? And Coney, which tracks Coinbase, is 89 to 90s, right? I've seen it over 100 as well. So this, of those three, is lower. So for you guys that have jumped into YBIT or interested in it and don't know about Coney or Misty, I'm going to report on those a little later in the morning, as I always do before the market opens or right at market open. So you guys want to know how they work and what the synthetics are doing, how's the weekly, what are we likely to get as a payout. Okay, a little bit more. Here's BITO-H. Okay, I called this holdings for BITO. All right, so what does BITO hold? Well, first off, it requires you to know a little bit about futures, right? So let me drag this guy over. In futures markets, again, I'm not going to do a long future. When you own something, so you see CME BTC future May 31st, BTC K4. Well, what does all that even mean? Well, first off, they give you a number for the last part of the year, right? BTC is always the underlying future. The K corresponds to the month of May, right? The month code here. So it's just an alphanumeric, right? You have a month and then you have an alphabet code. So look at this. This is, and by the way, the significance of the dates at the end are the expiration dates. So in futures, if you buy that, like if you wanted to go out and buy an October future price of Bitcoin, you're going to pay a premium because you're buying it now and it doesn't expire. You don't have to keep rolling it, right? It may not be as active because the front month is always the most active. Okay, so that's what that means. I've also got a couple things here to show you just quickly. This is volume and open interest. Anybody who tracks options, even on stocks and other securities, understands what open interest is, right? How many people own that contract? Volume just says how many people are buying or selling it today, right? And then what are the exchanges, right? There's no open outcry here, which is a form of people raising their hand. You've seen it in the futures market or stock options where there's a trading pit, right? For orange juice or cattle or gold. They don't really do that much anymore. Most everything's electronic. So Globex is the way it's traded, and the underlying exchange is CME. So look at April 2024, and let me show you on the calendar one more why this is important. You have first trade, last trade, and settlement. So the last trade day for the April contract, BTCJ24, right? Remember that one only had a 4. It really should have a 2-4 for the year. And the J would correspond to April. So that expires in 2 trading days. So you basically have to settle out of that and be out before this settlement date on Monday the 29th. So that's the significance of those. So there's a lot involved in options, but just to give you, or futures, sorry. And there are puts and calls on top of options, okay? Which is just like there are puts and calls on top of stocks. So I'm not going to do any more than tell you that right now on a notational value that 47% of the BITO funds, and see, they don't say if they're long or short, right? Because they could go long and turn around and buy a put because they think for a week it's going to go down and trade out of it. It looks like they're just going long, but I don't have that detail, right? I have that detail on Yieldmax because they give me an intraday report. On here, they just tell me what they hold, right? But I can keep going out daily and looking at what they hold and try and see the change. Or like in this case, this April one, they're down to 939 shares or contracts, right? and here's the effective price, and here's the estimated value, and what percent of their holdings, right? And they expire on 4/26, whereas 47% of the fund is in the May. Well, as we move through May, you'll see them start to move more into June. And this last thing is a futures daily roll index swap. It's just a way they can place money, okay, to move some cash before they roll back into one of the main funds. Okay, so basically that's how 100% of their allocation of tracking Bitcoin, and this would be their treasury bills, which act as collateral, right? When you start doing this kind of volume of contracts, they want to know that you have cash, right? And so this is the liability. Basically, all these things add up to you need to have a minimum of 943 million, or you would get a margin call, right? Well, they've got $1.4 billion in the fund, in the treasury bill. Well, technically the value, like the treasury bills yielding, they're at, they've got about 300,000. Well, that's 400,000. So they've got 300,000. That is the difference, right? And you see that in all these funds. What's the par value versus what is if you cash it right now? Okay, enough on that. But since this is unique, I wanted to educate you guys just briefly. For those of you that know more, great. If you have questions, feel free to hit me up. Okay, let's get back here. So I went through the holdings. So we closed at 1977. When I run the assets, it says we're selling at 7% less than the NAV, the expected NAV price. How do they know what the expected price of the fund? Because you take all of their assets and add them together and divide by the number of shares. Probably what could be happening, there's another 5,000 or 10,000 share number they're using, but they're not updating us yet. So it probably is only 1977 over here as well. So don't run out and buy it because you think it's trading at a discount. So on the synthetic, when we move down, this is how I track the synthetic. So we have 860 contracts, right, that run till 5/17. Well, you can see how we can start to make a lot of money here. Let's say that BITO runs to 33. Well, when it's at 33, the value of this is a minimum $4, right? Because it's $4 above the call strike price, right? And then there's time premium. So if it ran to 33 tomorrow, this is going to be $4.50, right? So let me do a save, and then I'll plug a new number in, and then I'll get rid of it, right? I won't save it. Actually, I don't want to do it that way. So if I did that, we would magically be well into the money, right? So this would go from less than 1 to 4.5, right? So we would be up big time on our synthetic, and guess what happens to a put? Since we're well above that put, the put would be down around 50 to 60 cents. It would only have time value left. It wouldn't have any value. Right now, at 27.85, okay, there's $1.15 of this 285 that's because we're below $29 by that much. The rest of it is time premium to get out to May 17th. Okay, guys. Let's see. So let's go one more time to holdings. And we're in holdings. April we've covered. Let's look at our synthetic, right? So this is where we're down, but we would be way up with these numbers flipping around, right? Let me do something. I'll show you. I'll copy and paste these numbers so I can put them back in here. But I love to teach on this, as some of you know. So I'll put this over here, and I'll put this over here so I can restore the correct values. So let's say we run up, and now were 4.5, right? Because we ran to 33. Okay, and this one is only 0.5 because we ran to 33. All right, so we went from having a $166,000 loss to having a gain of $430,000. So just like that, we flipped $540,000, right? So as I learn that, I start putting in, each $3 equals, 400,000, something like that, so I can explain it to the people who watch it, right? So let me take this one back here. Okay, back to $166,000 loss. Okay, final thing, let me give you an idea. So we're not going to get a payment for 5 more weeks, right? We'll get a declaration on June 3rd. And that'll tell us for probably June 8th. That's the way, I'll have to look at June, but that's how May 3 we declare. It's like a Wednesday, and then we pay on the Monday. So I think it's the same in June. So you're not going to get a payment in this BITO tracking YBIT until June. I mean, it could be like 0.1% chance. So where do we stand? Nothing has really changed, but for those of you trying to understand how we do it, you just simply go back here and you say, okay, we picked up 116,000 because we sold a put for more money than we spent on the call. This is just kind of a liability, but it's only on the books. It hasn't been taken off the books yet. Okay, and then the other piece of it is the weekly, right? That's this thing that we wrote in April here. Oh, and I meant to show you that. Okay. So as we come across on this, the good news is the value of this thing is really gone down, right? We sold this at 45 cents. Well, it's at 2 cents now. Let's go to my holdings. Sorry, it's at 4 cents, right? So we sold it at 45 cents. We can buy it back for 4.5 cents. So my gut, if I was them, I would buy it back tomorrow for 2 cents just to ensure 42 44s, right? And then I would go ahead and write a May 3rd. So depending on what they can get on a May 3rd, I meant to look it up before, but I haven't. I got off into the BITO and doing the futures and prepared all that for you. But that's how these things work. They do weeklies here. So we don't really want it to run past 30 in the next 2 days because we could be eating into this, right? Now, what kind of money are we talking? Not a huge amount of money, but we've got 39,000, right? Well, we're counting that money. They give it to us when we sell it. So we don't want to overrun that guy, right? 29, 29.50, 29.80, 29.95 even, right? Even 30 or 29.99 and we get to keep the 39,000. So that's where the weeklies are kind of calming. When you're trending slightly down or staying flat, you write out of the money weekly calls and you capture all of that income. Okay, guys, that's where the money comes from, right? That's the 31 cents right now that we're counting on. So if we go roaring up, our synthetic goes up 500,000, but our actual short call income goes down because we'd have to give that 39,000 back and maybe buy more if we ran to 31 or 32 or 33. It could cost us a lot of money. So that's the nature of what happens here and how this fund generates income. Okay, that's it. Hope this helped a lot, guys. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Have a good one. Catch you next time. Bye for now.